So, the anime starts things off with a flashback to 3 years prior, showing Korea's third failed attempt at securing Jeju Island. We don't get an explanation as to why this island is infested with ants, but it does introduce hunters, the immense power of the S ranks and the guilds that are built around them. Hunters are those who awakened with powers due to the integration of mana within their body. The amount of magical power within them determines whether they're ranked from E to S. Then the fact these hunters were the only ones capable of fighting the magical beasts which appeared 10 years ago resulted in a global billion-dollar industry built around them. It had birthed organizations known as guilds in which most hunters are now employed under. Now, the current perception is that once an individual has awakened to their powers, there's nothing they can do to raise them or get stronger. Well, Sung Jin-Woo serves as the exception, all because of a hidden dungeon within what should have just been a regular D-rank dungeon. Before he was seen as the weakest hunter in the world, but after that he had become so much more. It's while said raid was going on though that lots of characters were introduced in between. There's Sung's old friend Joo-hee, the leader of the raid, Mr. Song, the chairman of the Hunter Association Go Gun-hee, then chief inspector of the association's surveillance team, Woo Jin-chul. The initial two are more side characters related to Sung's personal life, while the latter serve as lore dumps explaining why hunters do what they do. So, gates open up connecting dungeons to the real world, and should a gate remain open for longer than a week, the monsters within can escape, resulting in what's called a dungeon break. This is what the hunters fight to avoid, because when monsters escape into the human world, there's nothing regular people can do to fight back. Only hunters can fight against monsters. A further incentive motivating guilds to clear dungeons is the insane amount of money that can be made from doing so. Not only are there rare resources to be extracted from the dungeon itself, but every monster defeated also drops an essence stone. These are then sold and turned into powerful weapons and equipment, allowing for hunters to perform more higher-level raids. As it turns out though, the government seems to have their sights set on another purpose for the dungeon's resources. An alternative power source safer than nuclear and more efficient than all the others. The ideal clean energy source capable of catapulting society forward. This makes hunters and guilds the exclusive source of these resources, setting them up as one of the most valuable assets currently out there. So, knowing just how much money can be made from being a hunter, it makes sense then that despite Sung Jin-Woo being the weakest, he would continue to be a hunter in order to pay for his mother's medical bills and his sister's tuition. The medical coverage was more so a benefit of being a Hunter Association employee, but the potential to get paid was certainly far higher than any other job. Keep in mind his mom's illness isn't something that can be cured either, so the bills are a recurring cost that keep her on life support. If he wanted his mom to live, then this to him was the only way. So, here we get to see just how weak Sung Jin-Woo is, barely being able to fight a goblin. Joo-hee constantly has to heal him, putting into question why he's even a hunter in the first place. Since we already know the answer though, the same can be applied to why he chose to continue further into the hidden dungeon. The fact his dad went missing also served as motivation as well. Next we see the testing of Sung's future friend Jin-ho, followed by a display of how guilds are constantly trying to recruit new high-rank hunters. The guild in question is the Hunters Guild, and it's shown to be led by the S-rank hunter Joy. His goal is to pick up any hunter that seems like they could be valuable, specifically in hopes of buffing the guild's overall manpower, but to do that they'd need another S-rank hunter like her. This is Cha Hye-in, and though we likely won't be seeing her as a prominent character for a little bit longer, she has been making recurring appearances as one of the top member of Choi's Hunters Guild. She's currently been assigned to training new recruits, since while it is helpful to maintain the Hunter Guild's position as a top 5 guild in the country, it also makes them far more notable in the international scene. A field where at the moment, they're really nothing special. Switching back to Sung now, with him and the others finally making it to the end of the double dungeon, that's when they're met by the nightmare which would slaughter pretty much everyone. Only 4 of them made it out in the end, leaving Sung behind as the last one standing. This resulted in him acquiring the qualifications to become a player, not only saving him from what would have been certain death, but also granting him access to this video game-like system. So, after a flash of light symbolizing his acceptance into the system, Sung would be found by the hunters of the White Tiger Guild, awaken in a hospital, then be questioned by Woo from the Hunters Association. Since so many hunters died yet nothing was found, Their first assumption was that Sung Jin-Woo had reawakened. A second awakening, allowing previously graded hunters to exceed their limits and rise to the A or S rank. It was the only explanation for how Sung could have survived. This was of course proven incorrect, as the second test of Sung's mana proved to be worse than his first. What he gained instead was a system designed specifically to assist with the development of the player, aka him. His daily quest would then be presented to him. A penalty applied for him not doing it, then rewards given for the completion of it. For the daily quests that are completed, a full recovery instantly brings him back to full health and stamina. 3 ability points can be used to bolster any of these 5 attributes, then a random mystery box is given, because what's a game without some gacha mechanics? For the most part, those boxes usually contain something useless, but every now and then Sung would get something like a dungeon key. This would lead him to the instance dungeon at the subway station, where Sung would get his first chance to level up. He first spent a week upgrading his strength via the daily quests, then set out to test what his new self was capable of. By the end, he had achieved level 17, improved his stats by over 80 points in total, then gained a brand new dagger with which he could fight with. Experience gained was proportional to the difficulty of the monster he was fighting against, and their difficulty was indicated by the color of the text dictating what they were. Each level up then boosted his stats by 1 point in every attribute, making the dungeon easier the more he farmed it. The boss was still pretty difficult, but after that was beat and Sung exited the dungeon. His new power was highlighted by the D-rank golem he just straight up one-shot. A little more time would be spent training at the hospital, after which Sung would be transformed into this. We then get our first good look at Beck, the leader of another top 5 guild, the White Tiger Guild. Now, Sung's return to his life would remind him he still needed to make money, so in order to get some quick cash for rent, he decided to join a strike squad as a stand-in. A simple addition to the team just so they could meet the 8-person minimum required to do the dungeon. Such were the rules the Hunter Association imposed, and this was Hwang Dong-suk's way of bypassing them. So, it's here Sung would become acquainted with Yu, the wealthy son of a business billionaire. Both would then get trapped in the boss room, left behind to serve as bait and a distraction. A C-rank boss wasn't enough to intimidate Sung though, as being level 18 gave him the confidence to at least try and fight. So, after a fierce back and forth in which Sung's fatigue limit was starting to affect him, his full recovery reward would provide him the strength needed to land the critical hits necessary to win. That's when Hwang and his crew would make their return, threatening Sung to the point that the system would have to step in. Since Sung's life was determined to be in danger, an urgent quest was given requiring him to kill the ones who betrayed him. The result was one of the coldest sequences in the entire anime, showing Sung's transformation into someone who will do what was necessary. Since hesitation almost got him killed here, that was a mistake he wasn't going to make twice. Now, it was in between all this that Go and Woo's training would highlight the importance of hunters refining their technique, while some members of the Hunter and White Tiger Guild would discuss the inner workings of their own training. These are once again characters who will show up later, so it's good to remember at least which guild they were part of. It's also important to note that Hwang Dong-suk was older brother to Hwang Dong-soo, an S-rank hunter currently employed in America. It doesn't take long for the news of his brother's death to reach him, setting in motion a whole separate revenge plot. In the meantime, we have the Hunter Association gaining suspicion on Sung, while Sung himself continued to discover how the system worked. Jin-ho would then ask Sung to help him finish the 20 raids so he can become a guildmaster, resulting in the deal which would allow Sung to continue leveling up solo. For a bit more context as to why Jin-ho's father even wants a guild, it's mainly because it's a profitable market he wants to get into. You see, with the 5 most powerful guilds effectively serving as a monopoly, they essentially have full control over a resource that society is becoming increasingly reliant on. This has in turn made guilds incredibly wealthy, and that was a pie Jin-ho's father now wanted a piece of. Whether or not his intentions were noble like how he says, he could only get that piece by establishing a guild first. Thus the reason we see him attempting to poach hunters like Chama. In any case, Sung would still get the deed to the 30 billion won guild building, but at the same time also be able to do dungeons all by himself. It was while Jin-Ho was finding stand-ins for these raids that Sung would gain access to yet another instance dungeon, get his ass beat by the very first enemy he came across, then somehow pull through with the help of the cash shop and its potions. This made it clear that this S-rank dungeon was a bit too hard, so while it did contain the cure for his mother's illness, Sung knew he wouldn't be able to claim it now. The elixir of life was something that would have to wait until he was stronger. This brings us to Sung's emergency summon from the association, reuniting him with the survivors from the double dungeon, plus a few extras in the form of Kang and his prisoners. The gate was supposed to just be a simple cleanup, but after coming across Kang in the middle of his extracurriculars, the whole thing would quickly escalate into a fight to the death. So, an urgent quest would dictate him as an enemy that needed to be killed, and Sung would do just that in yet another cold display of mercilessness. Right before Kang would die though, Sung would first reveal his ability to grow stronger, then Kang would warn Sung of the darkness that would come from it. Sung couldn't help but agree, since the stronger he got, the more he felt like he was losing himself. It was as if something within him was falling apart the more he did what the system wanted him to. In any case, with Sung having defeated an upper B rank, he was at the very least as strong as a low A rank now. Fast forward through his solo raids with Jin-Ho, and that would bring him to level 40, the required level to enter the job change quest. It was during this that a manager from the White Tiger Guild would gain an interest in Sung, leading to his own attempt to recruit Sung to his own guild. Sung would finesse him out of a few 100 million won, then head out to the forest where he could complete his new quest uninterrupted. This is where Sung would come across some of his toughest opponents yet, culminating with his battle with Yggdrasil. It was an epic fight edged out by Sung's strategic use of his weapons and equipment. Killing Yggdrasil was just the first part though, since after that, wave after wave of knights bombarded him relentlessly. Visions of his allies and former self would urge him to give up, but the resolve of Sung now was far greater than what it was before. Then, right as Sung was about to be killed, he would be transported to the penalty zone almost out of pure luck. His former self actually believed it to be a higher power's intervention, stating how it seemed like something didn't want him to die yet. So, after recovering in the penalty zone and leveling up 4 more times, Sung would be more than capable of defeating all the monsters awaiting him. This would reward him the class of Necromancer, a title quickly enhanced to that of Shadow Monarch. In the end, he had successfully commanded the Knights and Yggdrasil to join his ranks, marking yet another transformation from that of the weakest hunter, all the way to a powerful leader capable of commanding a shadow army. This was the point where Season 1 ended for Sung, but for everyone else there was a far greater fight brewing. All throughout the last few episodes, bits and pieces were shown building the conflict at Jeju Island. The last scene was Choi and his squad finding a disturbing development of the ants that once decimated their raid teams before. There's definitely some heavy trauma behind the failed raids at Jeju before, and it seems like that's the arc that the anime is building up to the most.